Welcome back to DBD TV, the spin-off of Dragon Ball Dissection, where I examine the changes made to the original Dragon Ball manga when it was adapted into the two television series Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. And speaking of Dragon Ball on television, have I mentioned I will be giving the full Dragon Ball Dissection treatment to Dragon Ball GT? Oh, I have? Several times? You know that, right? Please tell me you know that. It's very important to me that you know that. Anyway, we're in the Majin Buu arc right now, so let's get to it. This is my third installment covering the animated version, and I'm trying to find ways to tie things together. So how about this time I do it with an internet-friendly numbered list? Here are 7 things, in no particular order, the animated version changed from the manga. Why 7? Because of the Dragon Balls? No! I finished writing the script before I came up with this framing device, and I had 7 topics, so that worked out. Yay!
Number 1.
In animated Dragon Ball, there's a lot of what I think of as stock filler ideas. Basically, when a manga plotline is being adapted and they still need to fill some time, break the pace, stuff like that, they will turn to a corral of recurring ideas that can easily be dusted off and slotted in, usually right after the commercial break. In the early days, it was the Muten Roshi being a pervert. In the late Saiyan arc, it was cutaways to the gang watching the action on television and discussing it. In the late Frieza arc, it was Chi-Chi and the others failing to blast off to Planet Namek. I could go on, there are countless variations on this, however, I think you get the point. This is not a bad thing, not necessarily. Especially in sections of the story where fighting stretches on for a long period of time, these scenes provide what I consider to be very necessary breathers, changes of pace and tone that keep the fighting from dragging. That doesn't mean the animated version won't drag out the fight in other ways. They're very good at that. However, cutaways help mitigate that, and I think the lack of them is one of the many reasons the Tournament of Power was such a huge, never-ending slog for me to get through. And that brings me to tournament filler. Now, as I mentioned back in 2020, Dragon Ball the manga does something fairly unique here by using the tournament as a B-plot after Goku and the others leave it. As such, it's not really a surprise that the animated version would go even farther with it. There are some filler cutaways before the characters leave the tournament, such as the ones I mentioned last time regarding Mr. Satan and Spopovich. But after the characters leave, it becomes a lot more pronounced. Trunks and Goten get into all kinds of shenanigans in keeping with their disguise as Mighty Mask. The announcer tries to track down Mighty Mask to let him know about the upcoming Battle Royale. However, the boys have stepped out of their costume to take a juice break in the green room and have to pretend Mighty Mask is in the shower. The boys get a meal, but have to make a quick getaway when they realize they have no money. Looks like the Mr. Satan era tournaments have really skimped on amenities, because I can't imagine Goku was paying for all those meals he was chowing down when he was a kid. On top of that is the announcer telling Goten and Trunks they shouldn't be backstage since they're not competing. Jeez, dude, this is the junior champion and runner-up. Half an hour ago you were singing their praises. Now you're going to shoo them out before the tournament is even over? In the animated version, even Krillini's daughter gets to come backstage for a second. But, you know, as I've liked to point out over the years, the TV version has never really been consistent with the whole only fighters are allowed in the buildings rule that they made up. Speaking of Goten and Trunks, when they do fight as Mighty Mask, the animated version adds a bit more to their fight against number 18. Specifically, there's a point where Trunks and Goten decide to switch places, with Goten becoming the head. It doesn't have much of an impact on anything, but it is kind of cute and a rather obvious ploy that the manga never thinks to do anything with. From the point the fighters leave until Mr. Satan actually sets out to confront Buu, a common cutaway becomes Mr. Satan trying to learn to fly. After seeing so many competitors, including his daughter, fly around, he becomes convinced he can do it too, and sets up various comedic scenarios where he can injure himself. I kinda like this, given how, at the end of the series, after Mr. Satan finds himself in the Kaioshin realm, which he believes is a dream, he attempts to fly by jumping off a cliff. Those two things aren't made to be connected in any way, and the TV series didn't know this would be a later joke, but it is a rather fun coincidence that the concept returns. Those are all rather fun or inoffensive in a general sense. Here's the thing, though. While the manga uses the tournament as a lighthearted B-plot, after Vegeta shows up and kills everybody, we don't see it again. That is very much not true in the animated version, which frequently cuts back to the tournament for silly jokes for quite a few episodes in a row. This was a terrible, terrible mistake. The reason why should be fairly obvious. I actually feel awkward having to explain it, the same way I would if I was having to explain why you shouldn't have sex with your sibling. Some things should be taken for granted without me having to tell you why it's a bad idea. Having Mr. Satan and the announcer lightheartedly banter while hundreds of smoldering corpses are decomposing right off camera is in ridiculously bad taste. And sure, we could go the dark comedy route, but that's not what this scene is about. It's supposed to be a horrifying, dramatic moment, but the animated version murders that impact with as much efficiency as Vegeta murdered those people. So when I see Mr. Satan and the announcer standing in the ring whining, "What about the award ceremony?" and "What about my prize money?" I just want to grab the TV and yell, "People are dead, you dicks! Take your comedic cutaways elsewhere!" As if that wasn't bad enough, none of these scenes match each other. Sometimes the stands are empty, and other scenes they're packed. Sometimes it doesn't even look like any damage has been done at all. If anything riles me up more than inappropriate corpse-adjacent comedy, it's inappropriate corpse-adjacent comedy that can't even be consistent. Oh, but Mr. Satan drops his towel in front of reporters. It's time to laugh at the human tragedy. As long as we're on the subject, who are these reporters interviewing Mr. Satan? They don't look anything like Toriyama's art style. Are they real people? Celebrities? Seigasha animators? Somebody let me know if you know.
Number 2.
This is a relatively random thing to bring up, but yak on. Why not? Tekumaku Mayakon! First off, I'm fairly certain this is not in the manga, but they give Yakon's planet a name here. Ankoku, which just means darkness. Sure, whatever, fine. But what's really interesting to me is how they visually handle Ankoku. After all, its whole thing is that it's dark. The manga represents that by all the panels being completely black. Given the justification behind Super Saiyan hair, I can't imagine what possessed Toriyama to do so much inking. Or what possessed Toriyama to force his assistant to do so much inking. However, that's a visual choice that probably works better in manga than in animation. Aside from the plainness of such a background, it would probably be more difficult to accept outside of a stark black and white drawing why the characters are perfectly lit for our convenience. As such, the animated series handles this in a different way. The caves of Ankoku are drawn in a crayon style in a cold color palette, making everything look fuzzy and indistinct. It creates the abstract impression of darkness without things actually being dark. And yes, since it isn't actually dark, the TV version has to confirm that they are in caves, whereas the manga never has to firmly establish any topographical features. And when Goku transforms into a Super Saiyan, it doesn't simply light him up, we get to see the surrounding area in slightly greater detail. Maybe that's why Toriyama was okay with fully inked panels. It was still less taxing than having to come up with yet another planet. That's not the only time the animated series plays fast and loose with the manga's intentionally tepid backgrounds. After all, there's a pretty big fight in the Room of Spirit and Time, a place that exists to give Toriyama an excuse not to have any background at all. Well, as I mentioned when I covered the Cell arc, animated Dragon Ball takes the lines about extreme temperatures quite literally, by showing things like characters being engulfed in actual flames. I'm not entirely sure if that justifies Boo turning the room into a winter wonderland for an entire episode. I don't know how he does that. He just does. I guess it makes the room slightly easier on the eyes, although a bit drab. It allows ice physics to affect the fight a little bit. I'm overall neutral on the change. I don't dislike it, it's just kinda random. And pointless.
Number 3.
It is rather funny, though, what happens just before that. See, when the two Boos become one, and he gets that sweet, sweet redesign, the animated version draws his eyes with white irises. At first. See, it turns out that Toriyama colors those irises red. Rather than pulling a Vegeta and abruptly changing his color scheme hoping we don't notice, the animated version course corrects on Boo by providing a narrative justification. Gotenks hits Boo with his Rolling Thunder Punch, and after Boo recovers, his eyes are now red for the rest of the series. At least, I think those two events are connected. The show never calls direct attention to it or animates the change occurring. He has white eyes, Gotenks hits him, knocking his face out of view. When he lifts his face into the line of the camera, he now has red eyes. I think that's supposed to be on purpose, and I admire its subtly applied rationale. Anyway, immediately after that, Boo freezes the place up. As long as we're on the subject of Boo's animated anatomy, he has fingers here. Yes, just like Piccolo and Cell before him, the number of digits on Majin Buu is updated for television. Originally, this version of Boo just had a thumb, forefinger, and nub. It's not until after he starts absorbing people that the appropriate phalanges form. In the animated version, however, he already has them.
Number 3.
No, wait.
Number 4.
I might even keep that. Next up, how about Idasa and Ikose's mom? She was a real treat, wasn't she? Well, in the animated version, her role is expanded. Early on, we get a scene of her punishing her sons for losing to Trunks and Goten. We even get to see her poor, henpecked husband. But be careful, guys, if the announcer sees you back here, he's gonna kick you out. You aren't fighting anymore. Long after the tournament, though, she comes back, as the animated version writes it so that she is the one who rats out Trunks' hometown to DBD. In the original, it's never revealed who spills the beans. And it doesn't really matter who it is. It could be anyone who personally knows him or knows of his connection to that famous company. In fact, that probably makes more sense than Idasa and the gang knowing that. Still, though, it's a cool little connection. I don't think everything needs to be connected, and sometimes too many connections make the world feel small. That said, the Junior Division is largely a pointless, if fun, diversion in a story arc that so often discards ideas. This edition recontextualizes the Junior Division into a setup that is paid off in what's considered the main storyline of the arc, and I can't help but think of that as an improvement. Plus, it's funny that even Bobby D can't stand her. Alright, hi, Mr. Fusion breaking in here. If this doesn't get you guys to realize Dragon Ball GT is happening, I don't know what will. I'm doing another contest. Open to all of my channel supporters through Patreon, no matter their support level. I am giving away this beautiful S.H.Figuarts Figuarts? I don't know, I don't collect things. This is clearly not a sponsored giveaway, I paid for this myself. Anyway, it's Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku. At least I know I'm pronouncing that one right. Because nothing says I'm covering Dragon Ball GT like Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku. This highly posable, highly customizable figure retails for around $60. It's for 15 and up. Yeah, this is a serious hardcore action figure. It's not for babies. This little toy is for sophisticated collectors. So there is a link in the description to a Patreon post. That post asks you a question. I've seen it said a lot that Super Saiyan 4 is sort of odd man out when it comes to the classic Super Saiyan transformations. It doesn't have the gold hair and all that stuff. It's a completely original design. So maybe it shouldn't be a Super Saiyan at all. But if it isn't, what is it? Well, it's time for you to tell me. On that post in the description, give me your best alternate name for this form. This contest will be open to all patrons through 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, August 31st. It's open to all July and August patrons. Subscription levels start at $1 a month. Only one entry per person. After the submissions close, I will choose 5 finalists and allow patrons to vote on a winner. So good luck to everybody, have fun! Now back to the Majin Buu arc.
Number 5.
How Toriyama uses the Battle Royale in the manga is by literally breaking away from the main story for a few chapters. Dabra comes out to start his fight with Gohan, and that goes on unseen in the background while the story turns its focus to this lighter fare. When it's over, the story returns to Gohan in the middle of fighting Dabra, having skipped over everything prior to that. It's a fun shake-up of the typical structure. Sadly, the animated version can't have that for whatever reason. It has to make sure you see every second because this fight is so important after all, and not simply a trigger for Vegeta's betrayal. Instead, Dabra decides he has to get in the zone before his fight, so he hops in his meditation chamber. That's when the story cuts away to the tournament, so all you're missing is Gohan and the others standing around waiting. After the tournament is over, Dabra comes out of meditation and then starts his fight. It's just so basic, who even cares?
Number 6.
Speaking of fight scenes made basic, you knew this was coming. It's Goku versus Vegeta. I mean, if you've already watched my videos on the Buu arc, you know how I feel about this. I'm only bringing this up again because so many of you will say something if I don't. Whereas the fight is only briefly shown in the manga, the anime insists we see so much more of it because I guess we're supposed to care about it for some reason. I don't care how epic their fight is because I don't care about them. For the last time, it's impossible for me to feel invested in two man-children screwing around for their own enjoyment while ignoring the threat that is ultimately going to literally destroy the world. As that last sentence demonstrates, the narrative thrust at that point is firmly focused on the question of whether or not Buu will awaken. This is a background event that only exists in service to that conflict. We see enough of it in the manga to satisfy its purpose. This mostly drags it out. However, all of that said, I must be fair and say there is at least one addition I think is pretty cool. Vegeta creates several rings of ki and uses them to pin Goku to a mountainside by his wrists, ankles, and neck. Not only is this a creative use of ki, especially from everyone says my signature move is spamming generic ki blasts Vegeta, but it actually succeeds in creating some tension. Goku is truly stuck, and all he can do is hang there while Vegeta slaps him, tortures him, and worst of all, monologues at him. To be fair, he doesn't talk that much. He mostly experiences a wordless flashback of his past experiences, primarily demonstrating his inferiority to Goku. However, it drags on a bit too long, with the choice of footage occasionally meandering into somewhat random territory. When he does speak, it's to tell Goku that this level of punishment is not nearly enough to make up for his disgrace. For a second, I almost feel some pathos for the stupid child. I also think it's funny that he taunts Goku by reminding him, "Oh, I thought you were going to finish this quickly," and Goku replies, "That's what I'm trying to do." I miss those days when that is what Goku was trying to do, rather than it being rewritten to him decidedly not doing that. Thanks, Super Saiyan 3, you suck! Anyway, that's literally the only addition to this terrible fight that I find at all memorable.
Number 7.
To balance that out, let me jump ahead to something that will be negative at first, but eventually leads to something really good. Bluma and Chi-Chi are paired together a lot in this arc, especially in the animated version because they are the moms. Outside of their mutual loathing of Idasa and Ikose's mom, the two of them end up becoming angrily competitive when it comes to Goten versus Trunks. Once the situation becomes more serious and their sons are tapped as the last great hope of the world, they're basically used for really bad comedy, both becoming annoyingly overprotective in a way they never are in the manga version. It can manifest itself as a mildly annoying diversion, like when they gang up on Piccolo because they think he's pushing the kids too hard without a break. That's at least cute, seeing how drastically fear of Piccolo Daimyo has faded in recent years. But then you get the absolute worst one, where Bluma interrupts the whole fusion lesson after Goku has the audacity to tell Trunks to lower his ki to match Goten's. She decides to go full pageant mom here, complaining that Goku is stunting her son's ability to the point that Kuririn literally has to drag her out. It's not funny, not in the slightest. It's the worst kind of pace breaker to a scene that's actually important. And it carries that awful subtext of, oh, those silly women can't understand the crucial man stuff we're doing right now. Let's get her out of here before her hysteria dooms the whole world. You know, unlike the men who have already doomed the world over their stupid dick measuring contest. However, this activate mama mode does eventually pay off in a good way. There's a scene breaking up Gotenks' fight with Buu, where Bluma finds Kuririn and Kame Sennin coldly speculating on the outcome of the fight. She chews them out for that, which only gets worse when Dende tries to defuse the situation by reminding her that they can save Goten and Trunks with the Dragon Balls. She is livid that a god would say something so callous, that he would treat death with so little weight, that he would not even consider the grief that death brings. There's no joke to this. The scene ends with Dende slack-jawed, completely without an answer. Because she's right. Breaking up a largely comedic fight, it serves as a nice tonal balance. In an arc that largely treats death with little regard, it's a reminder the story desperately needs. It's a message that is extraordinarily undercut. It's arguably undercut even more by the TV version showing most of these characters after they die, and continuing to demonstrate that death in Dragon Ball is largely like taking a vacation. Still, it's a good scene. That leads to another good scene 2 episodes later. Granted, it's a scene that seems to have forgotten the scene I just mentioned, but it does explore the same topic from a different avenue. After Piccolo blows up the door to the Room of Spirit and Time, the characters actually notice, unlike in the manga. Bluma is understandably upset and is once again not mollified when Kuririn reminds her of the Dragon Balls. This time, instead of excoriating them over the grief of death, she calls them all cowards for letting children fight in their place. And once again, they have nothing to say against that because she is somewhat right. It's basically what I posited as the inevitable paradox of the Cell arc. That story suffers by excluding Gohan from the action until the very end, but at the same time, there's nothing else he could have reasonably been written to do. Gohan falling into constant danger in the Frieza arc is justifiable when he's trapped on an alien planet with very little backup. It's harder to get around that when he's surrounded by adults, including his parents. That's why the adults do everything and send Gohan on safe errands until the last possible moment when he's their only hope. It's logical, but it diminishes Gohan's shining moment when he's been little more than a background player. This story has taken the opposite approach really, putting the kids front and center and having no adults step up in place of them. The Cell arc uses this but never directly addresses it, so it's nice to hear. That said, there are a couple of things that could be said to undermine it. Like a lot of filler, the main thing against it is that the rest of the story it's adapting does not care. Bluma and Chi-Chi have both gone along with this plan. The filler scenes I complained about earlier actually further that problem rather than help fix it, as the moms only object to petty details of the training, not that their sons are inevitably going to be put into mortal danger. My other lesser issue is the simple hypocrisy of her anger. Bluma knows damn well why the others aren't stepping in, which is the exact same reason she's not stepping in. They have about the same chance surviving against Buu as she does. In this case, though, I can largely overlook her unreasonableness because trauma and grief, especially related to a dead child, aren't necessarily going to manifest in logical ways. People lose perspective and lash out in highly stressful situations. So this feels wonderfully real. And like I said, training up the kids being a reprehensible if necessary move is certainly an idea worth exploring. So I'm glad this scene does. I like that it makes me think about and feel a lot of different things because life is messy and complicated, and people are messy and complicated. That same episode also leads to another addition I think is one of the most important improvements of the arc. You've probably already guessed what it is, but if you haven't, and even if you have, I hope you'll join me next time when I talk about it and other animated changes to the Majin Buu arc. Yep, I'm stopping here because I have my 7 numbered items. That's how it works. This is also getting kinda long. Don't forget about the contest. Gotta love Magic Pants Goku. He's quite the furry boy. And he's in Dragon Ball GT, which I'm covering in Dragon Ball Dissection. You got that? Tell me you got that. Good.